Welcome to Living Surrey. In tonight's show we have a Bertha battered Ride London 100 and catch up with some of the cyclists coming through Leatherhead. We have a special feature about Surrey's very own chalkstream, the Wandle, which is surely one of the greatest survival stories of any river in this country. Fished by Admiral Lord Nelson in Carshalton and once home to 90 working mills along its 11-mile stretch, it was classified as an open sewer as late as the 60s. Nurtured back to life in the 90s, it was healthy and thriving, until one dark day in 2007 when Thames Water accidentally emptied industrial-strength chlorine into it, wiping out every living thing. That was 7 years ago, and thanks to sheer dedication, determination and hard graft from committed volunteers of the Wandle Trust and Piscators, the Wandle is once again supporting trout and other marine life. But the key to the viability of any waterway is the range of life it supports, and keeping an eye on that needs constant monitoring, as Riverfly monitor Jim Dillon explains. So Jim, what are you looking for here?
We're counting the invertebrates. There's half a dozen different species that we look for. Olives, shrimps, and we have a count up every year. We actually grade them in different grades of the amounts we have, and we do the same exercise all along the river, year on year on year, so we can tell the numbers decrease due to pollutants and what have you. The fish eat everything here. They're absolutely everything. You see where the fish are so big in the Wandle. There it is. I mean, in a 3-minute kick sample, you can get probably 5,000 invertebrates in 3 minutes in a little net like that. So that tells you how rich the water is. It's very, very rich indeed.
Is there anything that would alarm you if you found it there?
It's the lack of numbers would alarm me. We certainly get all sorts of we get oddities along the way, but certainly it's the things that are not there that actually probably raise the alarm. And when we had pollutants in the river, the big pollutant in 2007, but the local spills only affect the numbers for a month or so, and then when the water trundles through, it fills up again. So it actually, fixes itself. It really rectifies itself. So that works quite well. So,
left to its own devices, the river's pretty resilient?
It does need a little help along the way. People clean it, like the Wandle Trust, certainly. I forget, as little as 5 years ago, there are mattresses, everything safe, everything all along the river, and it needs people. There are a lot of people volunteer every month with the Wandle Trust to clean it, and then the monitors get in here as well as another arm of it to actually do the monitoring of the invertebrates, and it's working quite well. I am an angler, and that's what brought me to it first, but I have to say, since then it's grown beyond that. And I think for all the monitors, in a way it has grown beyond that. There's another aim quite beyond angling. Although it's great that the Piscators is an environment group really, a conservation group really, as well as anglers. And they probably do, the club in terms of effort percentages is probably 80% conservation and 20% angling. So, and that works really well. I mean, the gradient is so great in the Wandle, which is why I had 90 mills on it many years ago. The gradient is so great. And when we have floods, and the river is only 11 miles long, when we have a flood, that river empties very, very quickly. And the flow is so great that the fish we have in the centre of the river are washed into the Thames. So we have groins. We've built hundreds of groins on the river, which are only about a metre out of 45 triangle, which gives fish refuges. And there are a couple of points where they've actually dug out little ponds onto the river where the fish can go into when there's a flood coming. But refuges are very important so the fish all don't end up in the Thames. And there's lots of fish coming out, lots of beautiful fish coming out. And of course we have talks of sea trout and salmon taking a wrong turn at Wandsworth coming into the river. So lots of things happening like that, which is all good.
Of course the trout are the headliners, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And bear in mind that when they had the accident in 2007, when they drained, there was only something like 2 trout for the thousands of fish they took out. But it's the trout in the classroom project that they got off the ground, and all the trout in here come from trout in the classroom many years ago, and their pin is pin fry, and some of those fish are 6 to 8 pounder, so that's quite, and a lot of them in 3 or 4 pounders all up the stretch of the river, so that's fantastic. That's a wonderful result. Very important to get the local communities and schools involved, and kids at a young age too, very important.
Well, I guess it is all about education, about why rivers are important.
Yes, it is, and that's one of our biggest goals, educating people. And the people who throw rubbish into it now, we're not going to win all the battles, but we'll certainly win a lot of them. I mean, we're taking sort of 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, but we're going forward.
What's the main thing people chuck away?
Everything. They go to quiet bridges and they'd empty trucks into the river. The hardest thing, the one thing that we can't get rid of is safes. People throw safes in the river. Lots and lots of safes in the river because there's asbestos and the scrapyards won't take them. So there's asbestos and safes because they're fireproof. So obviously we tend to leave them there because the refuge is for fish. We face them downstream with the door open and it's a refuge for fish. So it sort of works in a way.
So what does this river really mean to you?
I got involved, I'd been to the park for 20 odd years, and I'd seen an ad in the little, down there at the mill one year, and I wanted to get involved. I wanted to put something back. You know, I really, really wanted to put something. That's why I joined the club, to put something back, not as an angler. I just wanted to put something back. I couldn't believe that there was such a beautiful stream in London. in South London, I mean, I said I'd come past it for years, and I couldn't believe that this little gem was in the middle of London. And that I have to say, I was hooked when I got involved. I was really, really hooked on getting. I started doing stuff with the trust in the beginning, and then I was doing the cleanups, forever, and then I got more involved in the monitoring. And I wanted to put something back to help, and I want to do whatever I can to make sure that this is there for people for the future. And there are lots of people involved in, and it's great to be involved, and great to be involved the whole programme of putting it back, because it is a wonderful, wonderful little stream. It really is.
Even on a day when an ex-hurricane pays a visit, volunteers from the Wandle Trust are undaunted, and the hours of free time given all year round are the reason the Wandle is doing so well today. Every month, the Wandle clean-up goes ahead, targeting areas of the river to clear of both dumped rubbish and non-native plants, as organiser Erica Evans explains.
We're here in Beddington Park today to pull up Himalayan balsam or Indian balsam, and as its name suggests, it's an invasive non-native species and from the Himalayas. It's very easy to pull up. It's got very short roots, and that's why volunteer power is the best method for removing this invasive weed. It came over, apparently it was sent over by a British doctor in India in the 18th century or even the 19th century, and he didn't know what it was because it was growing in his garden. He sent it to the Royal Horticultural Society, and they didn't know what it was either. But they kept it in a greenhouse, and in fact it escaped because it has seed pods which contain about 800 seeds or so, and even a bird or a butterfly brushing past them causes them to explode, and then they just let go of all their seeds, and you find them by watercourses because the seeds then float down the river and put themselves or plant themselves into the bank. Now, the reason we remove it is because it's an annual. It outcompetes native plants, and therefore when it dies back you tend to get bank erosion, so we want to remove it.
So what native species does it sort of conquer?
Any sort of wildflowers like wild marjoram, oxeye daisies, those sorts of things. And in fact, sometimes when we have pulled up the Himalayan balsam, we sow native wildflower seeds and encourage them to come up in its place. The other thing about the Himalayan balsam is that it has such a powerful scent that the insects, and bees in particular, tend to gravitate towards it more than the natural species, so ensuring that it survives and thrives over and above the native wildflowers.
So it's a pretty sneaky and successful weed, really.
It is indeed.
On an average monthly clean-up, Erica has between 30 and 60 willing volunteers working on, in and beside the river, and what they pull out is unbelievable. At the last count, there were 19 safes, 27 motorbikes, 250 plus shopping trolleys, and almost 1,000 tyres, not to mention, of course, assorted kitchen sinks and, obviously, sofas. It's all vital work that's really achieving some stunning results, as in addition to the native brown trout, chub, dace, carp, gudgeon and eels are also present now. Although, unfortunately, the night before we filmed, there'd been some heavy rain, so it's a little hard to spot them.
Our volunteers are putting the Himalayan balsam that they've just put up into these big builder's bags that we've recycled from some river restoration work that we were doing last year. And we're going to take it to the car park where Sutton Council are going to pick it up in the morning. And with a rather nice touch, they compost it, and then they use the composted Himalayan balsam to fertilise their municipal hanging baskets and flower beds and troughs. So really the invasive non-native species is helping sustain the town's gardens and flower beds. We're very lucky. We have great working relationship with all the councils through which the River Wandle runs. They not only pick up the rubbish for us, but they come and pick up the Himalayan balsam as well, and that saves us having to face the cost of disposal. Not necessarily the Himalayan balsam, because if you leave it far enough away from the river it will rot down, but the rubbish that we pull out in the other months we couldn't possibly afford to dispose of the shopping trolleys and the motorbikes that we pull out.
You've been involved with the Trust for many years, and obviously in recent history there was the dreadful pollution incident of 2007. How did you hear about that?
We heard about it almost immediately from the Environment Agency, who were on the ground within half an hour, I believe, of it happening. It happened at Thames Water's Beddington Sewage Treatment Works, and they alerted the agency pretty much immediately, who telephoned us. It was rather distressing on the day, as far as I understand, not only a terrible smell of bleach, but fish in distress, and there was rather a large fish kill. And people reported feeling rather queasy, and they had their eyes streaming because of the bleach that was released from the sewage treatment works and went straight down the river.
Having such a vested interest in the Wandle, I wonder, how did you feel personally about that?
I think my immediate reaction was shock and that it had happened, but as ever with these things, every cloud has a silver lining. Thames Water owned up almost immediately, and they have pledged some money to the rehabilitation of the Wandle over 5 years from that 2007 incident, and it allowed the Wandle Trust to employ our very first employee as a development officer. I'm delighted to say she's still with us today doing some wonderful work. But it was depressing at the start, because it seemed to set the river back about 8 years in its development, really.
But it must give you a tremendous sense of satisfaction to see the river now and the health it's enjoying?
Very much so, yes. And getting everyone involved, I think that's one of the key things about the Wandle Trust's ethos, about working in the community, with the community. And we have great partnerships with all the London boroughs through which the Wandle flows, with the local community. Many of our volunteers are from the local community, with local businesses, with the National Trust, with the Wildlife Trust. I think, as well as doing some great fundraising in partnership with all those people I've just mentioned, we successfully bid for some money from the Heritage Lottery Fund. But I personally, having run the clean-ups for the last 5.5 years, am very proud of the way that they have been embraced by the local community and the local authorities, who take away all the rubbish that we find in the river for nothing. And the volunteers who come month after month, and we meet on the second Sunday of every month, and they turn up 20, 30, 40 people, giving of their time freely on a Sunday in order to make their community, their environment, better for themselves and for the wildlife, and for any visitors and businesses that we have in the valley.
Tell me how you got involved in the Trust.
Well, basically I moved to Collier's Wood, and I live right across from the river. So when I started reading up on the local area, when you Google the Wandle Trust is one of the first things that comes up on Google. So that's where I learned about the cleanups. Well, it's an interesting local area, and it's a fun thing to do. It's a different way of being outside rather than just going for a walk or bike ride. You get to be a bit closer to nature in a way that you can't normally be in London. So you get out there wet and dirty. It's quite a different thing, quite a fun thing to do.
So AJ, what's your involvement with the Trust?
So I coordinate some of the education activities. I coordinate a programme called Trout in the Classroom, which is involved in reintroducing brown trout into the river, but we do it through the schools. So for the last 14 years, the Wandle Trust has been working with schools, and school children have been rearing brown trout from egg to small fry, and then releasing them into the river. So this year we released about 300 fish into the river.
And do they thrive?
They do. So they weren't, when the programme started, no one ever really knew whether the water quality would actually be good enough. And they surprised everyone in 2008. They started a breeding population. So the first time in 80 years, well over 80 years, that there been a breeding population of brown trout in the river.
And what kind of reaction do you get from the children?
It's very positive. It's amazing. I think for them to actually, a lot of people here, a lot of the schools around here are it's a very urban area. A lot of the children maybe don't get an opportunity to go out into the countryside so much. And certainly they don't expect it to have it right on their doorstep. So for them it's amazing. It's to actually get to be there from the very start, from when these fish actually hatch, right up until they're small fish able to go out into the river. It's amazing. And we have a big day where we get all the schools involved down on one of the sites, either here or in Morden Hall Park, and we release them all together. So yeah, they're very excited. It's really positive experience, I think. And it's really nice. It's nice to know, that you are planting. It's like planting seeds in young people's minds. That you never know which ones are going to take, but those young people will always have that experience. And then when they come back here, when they come back to the river, they'll know, this is the river where the trout that I got the chance to actually rear are now living. So I think it can only be a good thing, really, for people to feel connected to the river, and that's one of the challenges I think for the Wandle Trust is to connect people who live in the area to the river, so they know that they can have a stake in looking after it.
And of course not to use it as a sort of general dumping ground.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, something like the cleanups really have to go hand in hand with a longer term project, which is actually helps people to feel connected to the river. So actually you're not just cleaning up the waste, but you're also trying to stop at the root cause as well.
It's your first time here. What's prompted you to come along?
Well, I've heard about the river cleanups for quite a long time through AJ, and I think it's a really good idea to get the community down to clear out the river, and also I think you learn quite a lot. Like today they've been clearing invasive species, is it? And so I think you actually learn quite a lot about the river and the makeup of the river, and also just picking up the litter, and just as we got here people were picking up litter around the river, and just seems like a really good idea, really.
So Bert, it's your first time with the clean-up as well today. What's motivated you to come down?
Well, I just think it's a lovely project to come down. Millions of people living right on top of this river, and you can come down and learn about it and see things. I saw a kingfisher this morning. I had no idea that kingfishers lived in a few miles from central London. So it's really nice to come out and see it. And I think it's good for the community as well as the river. So you meet all sorts of people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and they all take part in looking after this stream, which is in this river, which is really a good thing to do.
So Jez, tell me about growing up with the Wandle in your backyard.
When I was a lot younger, it was very bad. It was an open sewer, and I remember as a kid, if you fell into it, there was no questions asked. You was taken up to St Heather Hospital, and you'd have your tetanus jabs and such forth. It was, and I can remember certainly further down the stream at Hackbridge, down at Butter Hill, when the vinyl factory was there. You could tell that they were producing stuff because you could smell the river where they were putting, obviously, all their chemicals in. So, by how bad the smell was how much they were producing. It wasn't so bad up here in Bennington Park. This was our playground basically. We'd be tie rope swings up and go flying across the river. The only place you had to worry about was a couple of places up in Croydon that obviously very rarely actually did anything, because they were more on the they weren't really sort of producing anything. There was just more well, garages and such forth up there, so you know it wasn't too bad. But yeah, certainly further down, you didn't go near the river. You know, it was that bad.
And can you believe how it's fought its way back to health?
Oh, it's brilliant how it's come back to health. I mean, it's, you know, it's taken a long time. The Trust has been doing sterling work for the last sort of 10, well, probably 13 years now. And the change is amazing, you know. And as a fisherman on the river as well, and particularly a fly fisherman, it's brilliant to see trout back in here, you know, right the way down the river, mostly from sort of Hackbridge, Shepley Mill, and they're actually spawning now and breeding. So it's shown that the water quality's changed so much from being a sewer to now being quite a healthy river. You know, it needs work, it still needs to get there, but it's a lot better than it ever used to be as when I was a kid.
To find out more about the work of the Wandle Trust, or for anglers, the piscators, check out their websites below. Meanwhile, over in Leatherhead, the weather couldn't have been worse for the second running of the Ride London 100. But that wasn't going to stop the 24,000 cyclists who held the lucky entries from a ballot of over 100,000. We stationed ourselves with the stalwart volunteers keeping the riders fed and watered at the Leatherhead hub, just before they undertook the final push back into London and the finish at the Mall.
Apologies about the weather.
This is what I expected. I come from Los Angeles and haven't seen rain in probably 5 or 6 months. Brought my rain jacket with me. I've seen enough British television to know this is the typical weather.
What about the actual riding? How are you finding that?
Wet? Yeah, it's good. Especially like the sections in London. Looking forward to getting back to the palace there.
Going for you?
Well, I'm having a hard time actually. I did the tap 2 weeks ago in France, and that felt easier than today. And that was wet, but today I'm really suffering, yeah.
I thought it was atrocious weather.
It was atrocious up there, but for some reason I'm finding it really difficult today, yeah.
What's the biggest hazard?
Hazard? Well, obviously you've got to be aware of all the other riders, and clearly the slippy roads and the white lines and things, the normal things that cyclists are used to, really. But you've got some people are going quite fast and coming past quite close, so especially past the slower ones like myself.
See many offs?
I haven't seen any. No, I've seen everybody's been quite well behaved, really. Have you?
No. Early on, actually, right by London.
No, I think people seem to be quite well behaved and you know, quite considerate, really. Yeah,
there seems to be a lot of teamwork, a lot of warnings as you're going along.
The actual the organisation is absolutely fabulous. You know, the signage, the marshals, fabulous. You know, and a great big thank you to them all. You know, yeah. And obviously, even as we approach the feed stations, there's a warning: turn left, stop now. It's very, very good.
Whereabouts are you from?
I'm from Chorley in Lancashire, the Chorley Cycling Club. I'm actually on the board of British Cycling. I'm the vice president of British Cycling, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you kind of have to do this.
Oh, well, I'm suffering through this, yeah, but it's great because we're able to work with London and partners, obviously. They're very, very, Hugh Brescia and all the other guys have been really good in promoting this event, obviously. And it's going from strength to strength. And with the event this afternoon, it's one of 4 HC events that we're sanctioning throughout the year, so and certainly for next year, so it's really good.
Are conditions as bad as you expected?
It's quite bad, yeah. But it's enjoyable, it's quite good fun.
You're still loving it?
Oh yeah. I look a mess, I know, but
no, you don't know.
But it's good. Yeah, it's been really good.
You look as if you might have just done a short commute.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I stopped, I needed to go to the toilet, fill up, and I didn't realise the food was here, so I'm going to just have something to eat.
How are you coping with the conditions?
It's you know, like any bike riding, it's always variable, so it's less enjoyable. But on the whole, it's it's a good pace. It's a shame there's no hills because it's a bit more of a training ride, but it's you know, it makes a difference when you do see people. they cheer you on and it makes a world of difference. So I'm looking forward to getting to the end.
Oh, sorry, can I ask what happened?
I crashed into one of the barriers.
Whereabouts?
Just around the corner.
In Leatherhead?
Yeah.
And so that was game over pretty much?
It was game over. Not impressed.
Oh, what's your name, please?
Tom.
And are you local?
No, from Walton-on-Thames.
Oh, well, kind of local.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll let you get home. Bad
Thank
luck.
you. Cheers.
Are you uninjured though yourself?
I'm fine, yeah. Thank you.
Conditions better or the same as you expected?
Oh, obviously worse. It's pretty terrible. Actually, a bit better than I expected, to be honest. I thought the wind would be a lot stronger. It's okay.
What's the worst hazard?
It's just wet and slippery. I've already crashed out, so yeah. But helmet saved the day. So
where was that?
Just pulling over on the side, to be honest. So you just have to be careful because it's so wet.
Whereabouts are you from?
Toronto, Canada.
Have you come over for the race?
No, I live in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'd be quite far.
Well, we've had someone from California that came specially for it.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Nice.
So I've got Steve and Ruth here, who are volunteers organising the hub at Leatherhead. Steve, how many bananas have you got here?
I'm led to believe it's 36,000 bananas.
And what else have you got for the riders?
We've got biscuits, dried fruit, fig rolls, various sweets and energy gels and drinks in various forms. Quite a lot of stuff to move.
And Ruth, what do you expect to be the most popular item?
Oh, it's got to be the bananas. It's always the bananas.
Are you keen cyclists yourselves?
Yeah.
A bit, yeah.
Not tempted to take part?
Not in this weather. Fair weather cyclists.
And how many people are you expecting through Leatherhead?
It's 26,000 we're expecting to
expecting
come through.
26 on the day to take part, so we're not sure. The majority of the faster riders probably won't stop at Leatherhead here, so we probably would expect 3/4 of those to come through.
Get 15 to 20,000 will come through.
From more than 24,000 starters, over 20,000 cyclists completed the route, which was cut from 100 to 86 miles by cutting out the climbs up Box Hill and Leith Hill due to safety concerns with standing water and torrential rain. The spirits of riders, crowds and volunteers was amazing, however, adversity seeming to bring out the best in everyone. If you've been inspired by this year's event, you might like to put your name in the hat for next year's Sportive. The ballot opens on Monday the 18th and will close when it reaches 100,000. Or if that seems a bit too much like hard work, don't forget the free cycle on August the 1st next year, which offers the chance to cruise traffic-free streets of the capital past some of the best-known landmarks in the world, from Buckingham Palace in the west to the Tower of London in the east, via the Houses of Parliament and St Paul's. Coming up in next week's Living Surrey, we've got the first in our brand new reports from the Surrey farming community, where we'll be hearing from one farm about life on the other side of the fence at this, the busiest time of year for farmers everywhere. The highs, the lows and the bits in between. And we'll also learn how hogget should be on a plate near you. See you next week on Living Surrey.